Hello, in this video we will be examining subtraction and division and how young children think about subtraction and division and some issues with trying to teach it. First of all, why is subtraction so difficult? Subtraction requires children to be able to think on two hierarchical levels. In other words, they must be able to think about the whole and the parts at the same time. So they have to go back and forth between the whole and the parts. Think about it. If you're going to subtract 7 from 10, you have to be able to think about the whole of 10, the part of 7, and go back and forth then to think about what the other part is. And so you have to think about all those at the same time. In addition, you don't necessarily have to do that. You think in one direction. 7 plus 3 is 10. You don't have to go back to the 7 or to the 3. And so it makes it difficult when dealing with subtraction and division, for that matter, because children have to think on different hierarchical levels. Also, subtraction is not a natural way to think for children, whereas addition is natural. Children tend to think about objects and actions positively. As you know, children want more. They rarely talk about less and that sort of thing. So it's always, addition is a positive, where subtraction is a negative, and addition is natural to children. Division, why is it difficult? Problems involving borrowing particularly require the making of two kinds of part-whole relationships. The child has to deal with the whole again and at the same time consider the parts. And when borrowing, you have to reinvent a new whole and at the same time consider the parts. It's very complicated thinking. What do we know about strategies children use when solving division problems? First of all, studies have been conducted both all over the world, but in two particular studies from the U.S. and Africa. The findings indicate that when solving division problems, third graders, particularly slow developing, use repeated addition to solve the division problems. More advanced third graders use multiplication. So we've seen a great deal that children will use repeated addition or multiplication to solve subtraction and division problems. Why use word problems in games in subtraction and division? Well, again, research shows that 1/3 to 1/2 of children in kindergarten and first grade, that young, can solve word problems involving subtraction. In other words, they can do subtraction types of problems, but it has to be in a context that's interesting and makes sense to them in order for them to be successful. And another reason is that children don't have to use subtraction or division to solve word problems. They tend to use addition and subtraction and multiplication and division. Finally, we do know that when addition becomes automatic, when children automatically know sums and they know them very easily, the corresponding subtraction becomes easy. So the best way to teach subtraction is to strengthen the knowledge of sums. And the best way to do that is through gaming, where they get lots and lots and lots of repetition with also lots of motivation to play and win games and think about how to solve those sums. One thing I want you to think about is the types of subtraction word problems. It makes a difference how you word your problems as to how easy or difficult the problems are. Here are 3 different types. The first is separating problems. These are the easiest. And when you do separating problems, the way it's worded, you separate a whole into parts. So in this example here, you have 7 pieces of candy. You give me 3 of them. How many pieces of candy do you have left? So we have the whole of 7, and we're separating it into parts with 3 and another part. Then there are equalizing problems, which are the next easiest or the next most difficult. This starts with a whole and adds more to form a new whole. So I have 3 little candles. I need 7 of them for a birthday cake. How many more do I need? So that's an equalizing problem. You start with a whole, add more to form a new whole. I have 3. I'm adding more to get to 7. The comparing problems are the hardest, and those are dealing with 2 different wholes. You have 7 pieces of candy. I have only 3 pieces. How many more do you have than I? That requires children to think about 2 different wholes and then compare them in parts. And that's the most difficult problem of all. So make sure you think about how you're wording your problems because it makes a difference. Educational implications. So this is the so what. What do we need to take away from this? It seems good to give subtraction and division problems from time to time, but don't expect students to use subtraction or division to solve them. This should be okay, as long as they understand what they're doing and can get to the end result. It's also important to pay attention to how we word or structure the problems. It makes a difference in terms of the complexity and the difficulty. And finally, the best way to strengthen subtraction and division is to increase knowledge and automaticity of sums. Knowledge of subtraction can be deduced from a strong knowledge of sums. Makes sense? So it's important that we focus there.